Right. Well, hello to all of you in Oggcamp, Liverpool. I'm sorry I can't be with you, but I was overcome by this appalling attack of complete indifference, and so I couldn't make it. I'm really sorry, but I've got some questions here. Where they're actually in the printer. I've just printed them out. They've been sent by one of your geeky people, and they'd like me to answer them. So, do you like those, by the way? Oh, they're magnetic. Yeah, I mean, not very geeky, but still good for an old man who has problems reading. What first got me interested in technology, and what was my first computer? Well, um, rewind to 1981, 1982, and I just graduated from university. I'm in Manchester doing first television series that I ever did. And I go into a Lasky's department store chain, now closed sadly. I think they're still online possibly, that specialised in electronics, and I saw a cluster of kids all around a Sinclair ZX. And I thought, I better catch this train or I'll never ever I'll never get there. You know, it's now or never. I had this idea. There was this phrase, computer literacy, if you remember. Well, you're all probably too young to remember, but the whole idea was you had to be computer literate. And I thought, well, I must do it. I must. So I bought, in fact, an Acorn, a BBC microcomputer, as they were called, which was my steadfast companion for 2 years, until 2 or 3 years. I added things to it, a CPM, a processor that allowed it to use CPM, which is a forerunner of Windows, not of Windows, I beg your pardon, a forerunner of MS-DOS. And then in January 1984, my friend Douglas Adams and I queued up and bought the very first Apple Macintosh to be sold in Europe, in fact. Adams got the first, Fry got the second, which is just as it should have been. And I was kind of hooked, really. What's the next question? Have I ever done any computer programming? If so, in what language or platforms did you enjoy the experience? Well, I learnt BBC Basic and Pascal and a bit of Logo, which is a very childish but useful language. But I never really got into the C++, pluses or anything like that. To be perfectly simple, just because my arithmetic wasn't good enough. I couldn't see when I needed to use a modulus, and why this. You just have to have the maths, and I didn't. So I was okay at doing pretty basic things, and I enjoyed it, but I couldn't have done anything major. But I enjoyed it. God, I enjoyed it. Oh, I showed off to my friends. I said, look what I can do, and get my program to do this. And I remember I built for ages a very basic sort of Liza engine. Liza is a sort of intelligent database that you ask questions.
An email.
Oh dear, that's my phone saying I've got an email. I'll turn that off sound-wise. Interestingly, this is my iPhone. Can you see that it's been pimped? It's been pimped in Norwich City colours. Isn't that cool? Did you ever see anything cooler in all your life? No, you bloody didn't. Anyway, sorry. Pathetic, aren't I? What was that question? Did I ever use Linux on any of my devices? Obvious question. Yes, indeed, absolutely. I try to keep... usually it's Ubuntu these days. It seems the friendliest. Again, the Unix command line or any command line is not my favourite place to be. I just get the backslashes and the forward slashes wrong, and the wrong space, and the debugging. So I just don't have the patience, to be perfectly honest. When you get to my age, you really just don't. Because in the old days when I was younger, you get up to 3, 4, 5 in the morning. I'm sure you've all done it, where you just type away, and you check through, and it's the excitement of getting little parameters right and so on, little calling to some procedure and building up little modules of procedures that you can then use in different programs. It's a very thrilling thing to do, coding. But Linux is great. I mean, I think naturally it's been incredibly slow. The whole GNU and Linux experiment has been very slow because it's relied on people's spare time, and without being an absolute red in tooth and claw capitalist, one can understand that the lure of instant cash, of money, of huge salaries and vast share price inflation is something that will keep people concentrated with their eyes on the prize. Whereas if you're asking gifted amateurs, not amateurs, but gifted, what's the word? Philanthropists, I suppose, to create an open source system like Linux, then you can't expect it, I suppose, to develop and come up with new versions as often as it has. But I love it, yeah. And the great thing is you can run it on any platform. So you don't need, you can run it on a Mac or a PC platform very easily these days. Would I describe myself as a hacker in the proper sense of the word, someone who creatively uses technology in everyday life? No, I think power user is probably a better description than hacker, to be perfectly honest. I like to get in there and get my elbows up, and certainly compared to all my friends, I would be considered a hacker. Whenever my friends have any problem with their computers, either Macs or PCs, I usually am the one who's called to help them out. It's amazing, as you know, how dumb some people are. But compared to you, I'm very dumb. I'm known as a fan of Apple. Their devices are undoubtedly shiny, but perhaps also the most locked down and restricted on the market. Does that worry me at all? Yes, it does worry me. I'll be perfectly honest with you. This whole, yes, the walled garden and so on, we talk about it a lot. Well, there's just two things I'd say there. One is, imagine the whole ecosystem. In fact, if it even would exist, had Apple not come up with the iPhone and then with third-party apps and then an app store. Imagine how that ecosystem would be if there weren't tightly sealed up APIs for the keyboard and for various other features, hardware and indeed software features of the operating system. It would be a bloody mess of just badly written, destructive apps and indeed malware of all kinds, as we're beginning to see more and more in Android. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a company that makes its own hardware as well as its own software, which is quite rare. To want to have an absolute guarantee that the devices they make, whether they're pods or pads or phones or iMacs or MacBook Pros or whatever they might be, that they work across the whole product line seamlessly. And I think, of course, as the cloud increases, that become less and less an issue for other manufacturers. But I think it's their right, and it's our right not to buy it if we don't like it. After all, it's still that long ago that they were a busted flush, and everybody said the company wouldn't exist anymore. But I do worry. that sometimes they're a bit tyrannical and a bit silly, and they should just loosen up in some areas. And I'm a great believer in jailbreaking. I really admire the iPhoneDev.org people. I think they're absolutely incredible. And what Cydia has given the world, what the jailbroken phone community has devised over the years has entered the mainstream of Apple's OS. Whether I'd say Apple stole it or not be for me to anyway. Shush, Stephen, I'll get in trouble now. My nice friends at Apple. Politics. Why do I feel compelled to get involved in such cases as a Twitter joke trial or the recent case of litigation against the Hobbit pub? Well, there are sometimes one can make a difference, I think. I happened to be in the Hobbit film, and I just thought, well, this is silly. The brutal assertion of copyright is one of the stupidest things that's happening in the world, and I've been very outspoken against it. I have observed that throughout history, the most creative periods in culture have always been when there has been a kind of loose-ish hold on copyright. Not no copyright, but not a stranglehold. It's a bit like a bird. If you hold it too loosely, it'll fly away. If you hold it too firmly, you'll strangle it. And I think it's the same with creativity. And I think music companies and film companies and just as sponsors of the Olympic Games can make fools of themselves and actually undo all the work that their branding is supposed to be favouring them with. They can undo it all by being stupid, by having lawyers who just see something, and Lucasfilms or whatever will see some artist in Devon has got a little display of watercolours they've done of scenes on the ice planet Hoth, and then they get a cease and desist letter from Marin County, San Francisco, from George Lucas's lawyers, saying they'll be sued. I mean, you just think, come on, you idiot. you just make people think, as if people don't hate you enough for the last 3 films you made. He's got to do that. It's such a pity. Just a bit of common sense, a bit of getting your ear to the ground and realizing there are the times when it's appropriate to act on behalf of your, the work you've done and the innovations you've made, and there are times when sharing is the best thing to do. And when it comes to the Twitter joke trial, again, you'll be amazed at the ignorance of lawyers and our ruling political classes when it comes to social networks and the whole nature of it all. And after the Spartacus moment, in which everybody tweeted the identical tweet, the identical threat to Robin Hood Airport that Paul Chambers made, it was obvious the law had been made a fool of. And like all weak fools, instead of backing down, they just became more stubborn. A strong person would have backed down gracefully and said, okay, we've got to look at this, we'll go to Parliament, we'll find out a way of judging whether something is clearly what in the opinion of an ordinary man, which is, it may sound like a strange phrase, but the reasonable man is a figure used in the common law, which is used both in America and in Britain and in hundreds of other jurisdictions around the world. Would a reasonable man think that tweet was a threat? And the answer is so obviously no. And it's just drives me insane. And the man lost his job, and he lost money, and he's got a conviction. It's all just so damn stupid. But I'm speaking before the final judgment comes out, so I'm very hopeful that Lord Chief Justice will actually see sense. Bloody hope so. Come on, get through these. Do I see the future of the web as a tiered society with subnets being used to subvert government control and monitoring, or as it was intended, an open expanse for users to explore? Well, it wasn't intended as an open expanse for users to explore, to be honest. The net just grew organically, as you know, from DARPA and other such things. But there's a kind of irony in the fact that in the mid-90s, AOL and CompuServe and things like that were the place to be, and they'd the web, once Tim Berners-Lee and the World Wide Web came out, then the net suddenly became a really rich environment. And so AOL, which was a private, as it were, a consumer closed, that way to call it, a closed forum, an online community, offered an internet ramp so that you could dial up your AOL number and then not just be inside the AOL program, the client program on your Mac or PC, but you would also be able to get through to the internet proper. And then AOL was everywhere. It was huge. And if Steve Case, who founded it, had not been so busy counting his money and had just looked up and sniffed the wind, he would have seen that essentially he would have migrated AOL into Facebook. Because every poster in the mid-1990s would have AOL keyword this film, or AOL keyword Marmite or something, and now it just has the Facebook equivalent, and Facebook is really just AOL, but brushed up for the modern user-generated content world, for the Web 2.0, whatever you want to call it. So that's an interesting question-ish. I supported Document Freedom Day, stood up for open standards. Why do they matter to me? Well, common sense, again, things like FireWire or iLink, as Sony called it, or IEEE 3459, or whatever it was originally called. These standards are often developed in the private sector, sometimes like Ogg Vorbis, I should say. Ogg Vorbis. They take a bit of time to trickle down. The average man in the street hasn't heard of Ogg Vorbis, but they will have benefited from some of the developments that have gone into it. And I think that's always the case. But it's very important that the standards are open, and I think HTML5 will be a giant leap forward, and we can say goodbye to Silverlight and QuickTime and Flash and Real Player and so on, or at least more or less goodbye to them. Which is not to say they haven't served their turn very well indeed, and they've all come up with their own sort of innovations. But HTML5 will, when it finally goes through all its committee stages, will I think change the environment enormously. So part 3, random silliness. If I could be a dinosaur, what would you be? Archaeopteryx. Oh, definitely an Archaeopteryx. I think because it's, you can fly, but you've got feathers, and you're not sort of creepy and glidey like a pterodactyl. So I think Archaeopteryx has got to be the answer. Have I ever been to the North Pole? Did I meet Santa? Oh dear, no. The furthest north I've ever been is Barrow, Alaska, which is the northernmost part of the United States of America. It's in the Arctic Circle, and I can tell you, it was very cold, actually. Yeah. Otherwise, no, never met Santa. At least I don't think so, not to my knowledge. That's it. Those are all the questions. Well, there you are. Sorry I was such a blathering idiot. The time is already, good heavens, and I must, good gracious. So enjoy.